Well, hello, everyone. This is Data-Driven Formula One. And as usual, Patrick, Henz, and Ganna Pogrebna here to talk about...
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Patrick. And today we're talking about 1966, which is exciting because the year started with a big change.
Right.
In automotive in general, right? So not just in the sport. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's go directly to the change. And this had been a new set of rules regarding the engines, meaning now we have been altered from 1.5 liters to a maximum engine displacement of 3-liter engine, which led to, of course, new developments, new designs of the engines, and in some cases, teams use different versions for their cars.
Yes, and also it helped in this case a relatively young team to win the championship because well it just so happens that they had the best car for this type of modification, I guess. Yeah.
Right.
And we've discussed this a little bit when we talked about Jack Brabham. So we have a whole episode. So if you haven't seen that episode, do check it out. But yeah, I mean, as a spoiler, you can see that, Jack Brabham and Brabham Repco, in this case, won the championship. Both, a driver and constructor championship.
Exactly, you can do the mass. As you pointed out, Brabham was able to adapt best to the new regulations. Also, we had some other happenings in that year which supported Brabham, and we will discuss about it. As you said, it was a very interesting year.
Yeah, very interesting year. As you can see, not like the previous year when we had one driver, Jim Clark, dominating the whole season. I mean, here we had some intrigue because we had a little bit of Ferrari, so two wins by Ferrari, BRM, 2 wins by BRM. One win by BRM, one by Lotus BRM, and then one by Cooper Maserati. So in a sense, we have a relatively, I'm not going to say balanced, but it was in a sense more interesting season definitely than 1965. Yeah.
Yeah, it will be interesting to use this data and let's say convert it a little bit more in knowledge, because you may have a little bit of wrong impression if you just look on the statistics. As you mentioned, Ferrari, we had 2 Ferrari wins, but also we will come to this from the 9 Grand Prix, they only participated in 6.
Yes, that's right. And but I mean, also the interesting part about Ferrari is that the drivers were different.
Yes.
So the wins went to different drivers, which is also kind of makes it an exciting season. And yeah, so it all started. So I mean, I guess up to probably the mid-season, there was no obvious lead in the season, so it kind of went to different teams, which was very exciting. So it all started in Monaco.
Okay.
Yeah, unlike currently, right, we normally go to Argentina first these days and then kind of work our way from there to everywhere else. But yeah, back in the day it was in Monaco, and Jackie Stewart. We haven't actually talked about Jackie Stewart in detail, but I'm sure we will. So he won this Grand Prix for BRM, and again was a very exciting race in Monaco. And this we already discussed in previous episodes, this movie Grand Prix. that I have to say I have yet to watch, but some scenes
Same
were
with me.
filmed there, right?
Yeah, you shortly mentioned Argentina, which we didn't have in the agenda since the beginning of the 1960s. I mean, the reason is quite obvious why we lost this race. In the 50s, we had with Fancho, we had Froilan Gonzalez. So we had a number of Argentinian and very successful Argentinian race drivers. Since they retired, there didn't came any new Argentinians up right at the moment, and due to this, the interest of the Argentinians towards the Formula One got a little bit lost. And as the season also, of course, is related to a financial aspect, we lost the Argentina from the annual agenda.
Yeah, that's right. But as we will see later, there are some, well, not, I mean, generally in the 60s, we had some cool people from Mexico coming in. So, yeah. So it's not like Latin America was not represented. It was, it's just kind of shifted to a different country. And indeed, I guess Argentina had other issues, right? After Peron, I mean, I guess it was quite a turbulent environment, and yeah, I guess it probably was just not very, yeah. So it's just as Formula One, or the generally racing, motor racing is quite an expensive thing to sustain. It probably was not very well supported at the time, and you know, if you have nowhere to train, then obviously you're not gonna develop much. But you know, these days we do have races in Argentina, so that's good.
Yes, and maybe we discuss it a little bit in our future episodes where we may speak about the Mexican pilots as interesting, even if we had, let's say, relative left-wing presidents. A lot of them had a high interest in exotic sports cars and like the idea to promote technical progress with the development of racing and cars, which we also saw particularly before the Second World War in Europe. But let's go away from politics. Right, we really have to see that Grand Prix movie. As discussed before, it was a very successful movie, which is quite interesting because the US in general had not been that focused on Formula One. So interesting that we had this Hollywood movie about F1 promoting this, let's say, this European race formula, and maybe also a little bit the European lifestyle, maybe comparable to the James Bond movies, which also have been very successful in the 1960s. We already discussed Brabham, and here, I mean, Brabham is, we can consider as a British team, but nevertheless, they used the Repco V8, which was came, if I'm correct, from Australia or New Zealand. I'm not completely sure. It was based on an Oldsmobile V8, but this local company, Repco, they really provided Brabham, and I think this was also very important for him to have some more local parts in his team.
Yeah, and this is the year when we also saw a miracle when Bruce McLaren finally broke away from 7 years at Cooper, and he, you know, there was the debut race for McLaren team in this particular Grand Prix. So so it's by all means a very remarkable year. Different, as we mentioned, different regulations on the engine. A newcomer, McLaren, and quite a few companies or constructors that were already present, and some, you know, up and coming drivers as well. So it's all, you know, was very, very exciting. Yeah. that season.
And
Okay.
with this, we're coming to Spa-Francorchamps.
Yeah.
And
So this was obviously. Yeah, so there are some really interesting pictures also from this from this race. And yeah, so it was a victory for Ferrari, and obviously, you know, Ferrari had well, probably Patrick will tell us had some issues in 1966.
yes,
But Patrick, as an expert on Ferrari, will be able to tell you better than me about those issues. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly, and I mean the issues. There have been two quite independent issues, and we will see this already directly after Spa-Francorchamps. So now we are in Belgium, and still everything was fine in the Ferrari world. We see a victory by Jean Surtees. And also his teammate Lorenzo Bandini finished third with the Ferrari 246, which is, I can already show it, one of the two different models that Ferrari used for that season. So this is the one with the 6-cylinder engine, and besides this, they already introduced the 312 with a 12-cylinder engine. So Spa-Francorchamps, as I said, still everything fine for the Reds. The same as in Monaco, and also in the next race, the race was used to do some scenes for the Grand Prix movie, where a number of well-known drivers participated, including the cars. And after the third position, Lorenzo Bandini took the lead in the championship, which, as we already discussed, will not held until the end of the season for mainly two reasons. First, there had been a lot of technical problems with the car. And second, Italy is a country with strong labor rights, had traditionally a high number of labor strikes, workers on strike, and Ferrari lost two Grand Prix as their factory workers had been on strike. And also all the rest of the country had been on strike. So this had been two of the reasons why, unfortunately, Lorenzo Bandini was not able to win the championship, besides, of course, having a very strong Jack Brabham in the Brabham car.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing to mention, I guess, is that if you guys have watched our episode on Colin Chapman, we were talking about Jürgen Rindt as a driver for Lotus, but here he was still with Cooper. Cooper Maserati team, and on the right hand side you can see the Cooper Maserati car, and in the best tradition of Cooper, you can see all the guts out on the on the engine at the back, and you can see what it looks like. So like very typical piece of British engineering, despite the Maserati's involvement. You can actually observe all the sort of how you know what the insides of this this car looked like. And generally Cooper had I mean, they didn't have a very bad season. Of course they had better they were performing better in the previous seasons, but overall I think because so many teams became really competitive that season, they really struggled. So yeah, but there you go. So that was the Spa race.
Yep. Then, as you already mentioned, the trouble started for Ferrari, and with this we're leaving for a moment Formula One and going to Le Mans. And the first problem, as already mentioned, we had strikes in Italy. Due to this, Ferrari was wasn't able to bring 3 of their 3 factory cars to Le Mans, but only 2. And now the story splits, and depending who's telling it. So the official version explained by the Ferrari team that states that under the rules, each car was allowed to have 2 drivers. So Ferrari was able to bring 2 of the big cars with them, and mathematically could use 4 drivers. And they decided against Surtees. And it was explained by the team as Surtees hadn't have enough experience in endurance races, and they felt because of his last injuries from last year that he wasn't strong enough to participate with the factory cars. As you may imagine, and as you have remember the normal, let's say, mindset, self-impression which a race driver has.
Yeah, Surtees disagreed with that.
He disagreed, yes. And he also identified other reasons why he wasn't allowed to start. And for him, it was linked to the big Fiat boss, Gianni Agnelli, because his cousin, which was Ludovico Scarfiotti, should start, and he saw that the Ferrari management preferred Scarfiotti because to please Agnelli, which had also already here been aligned with the Ferrari team. And of course, he was not happy with this, and to be sure, he wasn't happy at all, and he left the Ferrari team based on this impression.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, I guess if you are not completely not familiar with Le Mans, and you know you are a Ferrari fan, or you know equally if you are just a kind of Formula One fan and you don't know much about Le Mans, we have a recent film, Ford versus Ferrari, I believe,
Yes.
that captures the rivalry and the involvement of Fiat in this sort of in the whole sort of participation of Ferrari in the Le Mans, and the impact that it had on the company strategy. So you should definitely have a look at that. If you like I said, if you kind of have no other reference point in terms of Le Mans.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, in short, the problem started as Henry Ford Senior or Junior wanted to buy the Ferrari company and include it into the Ford Motor Company, which Enzo Ferrari first was quite open because he understood that he has to align the company with a bigger company because Ferrari is still very artisanal, and they would need to be part of a company which produce cars in higher numbers, also to use a synergy effect. So in the beginning, he was quite open to Ford's offer, but at the end, he wasn't happy, especially as Ford not gave Enzo Ferrari enough space for decision making. And this, we remember, was also the reason why Enzo Ferrari left Alfa Romeo, practically for the same reason. He only would have been a normal employee without enough space for decision making.
Yeah, I
After,
think this is actually nicely captured in the film. I think there's even a phrase that, a question that Enzo Ferrari kind of raises there to Ford. He says that if you make a corporate decision and I disagree, who will have a priority? And yeah, so yeah, I mean, this is quite nicely kind of picked in the film, and yeah, definitely I have seen it, so can recommend that you watch it in any case, I guess. But yeah, So this controversy was kind of nicely picked up, and this is why, and this whole kind of deal with Fiat is nicely picked in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this scene was also nicely described in the Enzo Ferrari limited series. For the case that you have Amazon Prime, you can stream it there without additional costs. It also presents this particular scene practically with the same quote, which I think is a historical quote from Enzo. But going back to this particular decision, I think the truth is something in between what Ferrari told us and what John Surtees told us. So I may imagine that both factors led to decision that John Surtees could not start in Le Mans, and as we speak about decision making, let's see a little bit what had been the consequences of this decision, the consequence of John Surtees to leave, but also the decision of Ferrari not to let Surtees start. So we see John Surtees quit at Ferrari, and at the end we see that John Surtees not won the Drivers' Championship, which he had a good shot to win with the Ferrari. It was a quite good car. It was quite competitive. But also Ferrari not won the International Cup for manufacturers, which also again had a good chance to win, because to win this, you need a good car. But nevertheless, if you have a good car, you also need to have one or better two good drivers, because it's always this combination of human and machine, driver, engineers, and all other team members, and the machine, the car itself. And also, to be honest, we had all the problems to start or not start with Le Mans. But if we see the results, I mean, the question is, was it worth it? Because as you may see also in the movie, the first 3 places went to the Ford GT40, and the winner was, by the way, Bruce McLaren, together with the later Ferrari driver Chris Amon. And the performance of the 2 Ferraris honestly wasn't that great. Both 303 P3 not finished the race. As mentioned, the third of the P3s not even traveled to Le Mans. And the same was true also for the smaller Dino 206S, which not traveled to Le Mans. Dino is a separate brand at that time, but it's part of Ferrari. Enzo Ferrari didn't like the idea of his son and one of his leading engineers to develop a 6-cylinder engine. And due to this, he didn't want to give the Ferrari name to cars which have this 6-cylinder engine, so they used the Dino brand. So honestly, we had all this very serious consequences of the decision, but if we see the Le Mans race, I mean, honestly, it wouldn't have been a pleasure to start with the Ferrari for John Surtees. So the question was the trouble worth it?
Yes, exactly. And yeah, so it's kind of a historical, as a result of all these controversies, there was this historical win of Ford over Ferrari that no one could even imagine. Yeah. Because of the way, Ferrari was kind of dominating this, Le Mans in particular, but generally, I mean, no one could even think that Ford could win against Ferrari. But there were multiple circumstances there. I mean, things were not easy at Ford either. And again, there is these challenges are also very well documented in various articles as well as the movie. So it's again, I recommend. I will refer you back to kind of reading books and maybe watching a movie. But but as a result, yes, we basically lost a very good driver in the middle of the at the beginning of the season rather than middle of the season. And yeah, so there were also drastic consequences for Ferrari not being able to start in all races
Yeah,
of the
and
season.
yes, and to finish that point, and I think interesting for our data-driven F1, I think it's somehow the end of an epoch where the different manufacturers could be successful in different big series, and even Enzo Ferrari had then had the idea that it wasn't possible to be successful in sports car racing like Le Mans and Formula Ones and other kind of races. So you had to focus where you want to continue. And even if Ferrari and others still participated in sports car racing, also successful, they slowly went away from other tournaments because clearly Ferrari wanted to focus on Formula One.
Yeah, so French Grand Prix. Yeah, so here we started to see Brabham winning, and yeah, so this was the first race in the season that was won by Brabham. As you can see, kind of the circuit is very traditional for Brabham car, in the sense that there is, I mean, there are several straight lines there that we previously discussed the Brabham cars, and we said that they were modeled kind of in more American style, in the sense that they've done really well on the straight lines and probably not very well in the turns. But on this particular circuit, it worked really well. And besides, I think the new regulations really were beneficial for this team. And yeah, so it was actually quite good for both Brabham drivers, Brabham himself, and also Danny Hume, who was the second driver who came third in this particular race.
Yeah, exactly. And this underlines that this track was really fitting for the Brabham car. John Surtees was, by the way, replaced by British driver Mike Parks, who went second. And again, also for Ferrari, such fast tracks are normally good. Bandini was leading, but unfortunately had became technical problems. That's why Mike Parks finished as best Ferrari driver. But nevertheless, of course, very good results for a new driver.
Yeah. So so Ferrari came second in this race, so it's quite good. So it was still quite a good race for them, despite
Exactly.
the fact that they didn't win. Yeah.
Yes, and we see that Ferrari had been using the 312, so the new 12-cylinder Formula One car.
Yes, absolutely. And so the next three races kind of also, if you remember the table that we showed you at the beginning, the three next races are also won um, by Brabham team. So yeah, but I just wanted to show you this fantastic circuit and Brands Hatch that is not used much these days.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, and but look at the shape of it. I mean, this is just amazing. And so I mean, and this is where we understand that Jack Brabham is not only a very good team manager, but also can drive, considering the shape of this circuit. And again, we have kind of several sections with good straight lines, right? But again, there are many turns there. So I mean, this race was also remarkable because McLaren earned their first points in this race, and again, I mean, we will, I guess, look at the British Grand Prix separately, but generally, of course, British teams do well in British Grand Prix usually. And this race was not an exception. Yeah.
Yes, and looks also like a fast track, like similar to France. So again, a track which fitted very good for the Brabham cars.
Yeah, and also Brabham cars had a significant lead in this race. They finished almost a whole lap ahead of the third place, which was I think BRM, right? And it was Graham Hill in this case. And yeah, so but if you look at this at the map, you can also see that there is Graham Hill's band, and so there's some actually very interesting turns. Clark Curve, so kind of all named after various folks who either raced for British teams or were British themselves.
Yeah.
So it's all kind of fun. Yeah, so very fun circuit. Like I said, unfortunately not used very often. Well, we will not see it very often in Formula One racing, that's for sure. So mostly we will see Silverstone. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Netherlands. Again, Brabham, as you can see from, as you probably guessed from the picture that you can see if you're watching us on YouTube. Yeah, and basically, again, a very good race for Brabham here, and Graham Hill came second in BRM, so it's kind of very predictable. And finally, Jim Clark managed to get into third place because, in a sense, and this is kind of what we keep coming back to. The cool thing about Formula One is that you can be really good, like if you are a good athlete. I mean, I guess the only thing that can stop you in winning the next season or the next championship is an injury of some sort, right? Or some personal circumstances. But in Formula One, you are highly dependent on the car and the team that you have. So, you can be a fantastic driver and completely dominate the previous season, but in the next season, you can struggle to get a podium position, to the extent that, for Jim Clark, it happened basically mid-season in the Netherlands. So this was his first podium of the season. And this is kind of something to keep in mind when we talk about, skill versus luck versus teamwork in Formula One.
Yeah. But quite a relative, we can say, a quite disappointing year for Lotus after the success they had in the past.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've discussed the kind of the innovation of Lotus, and I guess we kind of the 1960s. Well, and we will see this in the 70s a little bit as well, when it was a little bit like a catch-up game. So the first they would introduce something new, and everyone would catch up with them, and then again, in 1965 again they had a very competitive car that dominated the season. But next year it's already not the case, because we had changed regulations, we had very innovative Brabham. We have a new team a new McLaren team competing. So it was all very, very dynamic environment, and it's really like in through the looking glass, like in that fairy tale, right? You have to run just to stay in the same place. You have to run really, really fast to get there. Mm-hmm.
And with this, we are traveling to Germany, to the Nürburgring. Interesting fun fact here, this race, as it's a very long racetrack, so you need nearly 10 minutes for one lap. So the organizers opened the field so that also Formula 2 cars could participate. And due to this, the French team of Matra Sports entered. Quite quite successful, as the best of the Formula 2 cars came in on the 8th position. Matra normally quite successful in endurance racing, like in Le Mans. And together with the Matra car, also we have one team which should become quite well known later, entered a first time Formula 1, which is Tyrrell. So the Matra MS5 was being used by Matra Sports, the French manufacturer, but also by the British Tyrrell team.
Yeah, and I mean, this is also quite a remarkable race, because here we have John Surtees driving for Cooper.
Yeah.
Which must have been quite a scene for Ferrari, after John Surtees was racing for Ferrari. But effectively, this was a chance for Cooper to work with this driver, and unfortunately, we also had a tragedy in this particular Grand Prix, when a British driver, John Taylor, unfortunately died as a result of collision in this particular race. So as you can see, I mean, we've discussed this all the way through the 50s, how the cars were not actually protecting drivers very well. And this is still the case. You can see the picture. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the picture with Lorenzo Bandini. But again, like, apart from maybe helmets that looked a little bit better than in 1950s, I mean, the protection was non-existent pretty much. And this was a highly, essentially really deadly sport and deadly occupation to be a Formula One driver, and we will see, unfortunately, more tragedies up ahead in the 60s in general, and in Formula One in particular. And indeed, it was kind of all leading to, well, for actually asking for more safety regulations, but it's kind of developed at a rather glacial pace at that point in time.
Yep, that's it. And after Germany, we are going to Italy. Monza, I assume one of our last episodes was with a focus on Monza. We analyzed how many times Ferrari had won their home Grand Prix, and in '66 this was also the case. Monza, traditionally a course which favorizes the cars with a lot of horsepower, as Brabham and as Ferrari, and due to this time it was a Ferrari victory by Ludovico Scarfiotti, driving the 312, the 12-cylinder Ferrari race car.
Yeah, and exactly as you said, Patrick, it was Brabham was very, very competitive on this particular track and this Grand Prix, and it was very, very tight win for Ferrari. So effectively, Brabham just showed that they could compete even in Italy, and in fact, in the 1960s, this was a team that had success on such tracks as Monza, and so effectively, it was good to see Ferrari win, because it added some spice to this season. But at that point, it probably was already obvious that Brabham would be the winner of this season.
I think we can say that they had the best combination. Very beautiful photo, and we see that also in 1966 we still had three cars together in the starting grid, not just two as we see today, but three. So very nice picture to see.
Yeah, I just want to say to those of you who are listening to us, we are looking at Ludovico Scarlotti's photo in Ferrari 312. So, and if you cannot see us because you are listening to a podcast, do tune in on YouTube and have a look at the pictures that we're showing. because it's really worth looking at cars and at the drivers and understanding who these people are and what exactly they were driving.
Exactly, you have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, here we go. Watkins Glen in US. So again, we had the US Grand Prix this year, and finally, Jim Clark had his win, which was great. So again, just to see some diversity in the season and finally see Lotus, do well. And kind of gave some hope that maybe next season Lotus will improve and show some great driving and great engineering.
Exactly. Important here, you have to be there. You have to self-motivate you if you're not in the strongest car, because the technology was not that reliable. So it was only a question of time until both Brabhams would have technical problems. Same with Lorenzo Bandini's Ferrari. So we had 3 of the stronger cars out. And here Jim Clark was there when the opportunity arose and took on victory.
Yeah, that's right. So, so quite a remarkable season, like we said at the beginning. Very interesting. Different cars had a chance to win. Different drivers showed their skill on various tracks, and obviously the big. Unfortunately, the biggest loser was, I think, Ferrari, because of all the things that happened, sort of completely unrelated to engineering and skill.
Exactly. But we should not forget, we still have one race, but let's say everything was decided, but nevertheless, again, the season finals had been
in Mexico.
Right. And here we see John Surtees again winning a Grand Prix, but not like in the second one in a Ferrari, but with the Cooper Maserati.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to your point, Patrick. We don't know what would have happened had he stayed with Ferrari. Right. Perhaps Ferrari would have been a lot more competitive, and maybe we would have had some sort of a tie by the end of the season. If we saw John Surtees in Ferrari.
Exactly. And speaking about Ferrari, consequently, as they also did in the past, they still not understood each race also as a marketing event. So they preferred flying home from the US than to do the extra mile and still continue going to Mexico. So they used the time, save budget for the next car, and also already started working on the preparation for next season.
Yeah, on the one hand, of course, this is a rational decision because, I mean, they understood that they lost the season. So obviously what you want to do is go back to the factory and see what you can do to improve. But on the other hand, of course, it all damages the visual and the competitive part of the sport. And this is why, I mean, currently, I think it's fair to say that what is important in Formula One is the next race. It's always the next race that is the most important. So you do want to participate, you want to finish it, and preferably without a technical fault. But back in the day, it probably was not well. I guess until we see in 1968, as we previously explained with Patrick, when we see the advertisement on the cars, it was not that crucial to be present at each race. And some teams, not only Ferrari, right, at various points could basically skip races, especially in America.
Yes, but also the regulations have changed. So today each teams are obliged to really participate at each race weekend. So you cannot decide that everything is decided that you just don't participate anymore.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but I mean, also we will, I guess, in a separate episode, we will talk about the business model, and the business model very much of Formula One sport very much relies on you participating. So, I think it's not so much that it's regulated, but also, teams are motivated to participate because that's how they make the money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And besides that, the winners had been decided. A small decision we still had in Mexico. Due to his victory, John Surtees came in a second in the championship, while the Austrian Jochen Rindt went on the third position.
Yeah, that's right. And like we explained before, Brabham was the overall winner of driver and constructor championship. And this was very significant because Jack Brabham was driving his own car.
Exactly.
But he also was a team principal, he was the driver, and he was the main engineer. So it's kind of like almost a one-man show there. At
Yeah.
that stage, yeah, of course. Afterwards, Brabham became much more, and
Yeah.
it was already very much of a team effort. But let's look at some cars.
Exactly. And here we already see the Brabham BT20, very beautiful car. Just from looking at it, I mean, it looks fast. It looks strong. It looks reliable, and the looks didn't light. I mean, it was reliable for its time, and as we know, it was maybe the fastest, the strongest one.
Yes, and as you see, it is still very much kind of a straight line-ish car.
Yes.
So my guess is just due to the driving abilities of Jack Brabham and Danny Hume that we saw these cars being really competitive on the curve. Because I can only imagine like how you would curve in this car. I mean, this is it must have been quite a challenge there. But I mean, definitely the combination of skill and engineering helped, because on a straight line you would do fantastic speed in this one.
Yes, and in comparison, the opposite, the Lotus 43, which normally had been a lighter car, a little bit less horsepower, but better on curvy tracks. And I think you can see it. It looks a little bit lighter than the Brabham.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mistake that they made, they kind of stepped a little bit away from the arrow-shaped design that they had. Maybe they could have perfected it a little bit more. So I guess the problem was maybe aerodynamics and of course the reliability. We talked about Lotus last time. I mean, the notorious issues with reliability due to the fact that it was this eggshell type of design, and just if it's not strong enough, the stuff will fall off the car simply. As simple as that. So, but I mean, nevertheless, again, very pretty car. Yeah, I mean, but you can tell structurally it's not as good as Brabham.
Yeah. With this, let's go to the McLaren.
Yes, McLaren, a beautiful car. I actually saw it in real life. Very cute. I think it's like if you took the previous year's Lotus and Cooper and made some sort of hybrid. It's like a child of these two cars. And I kind of love the color scheme. It's very unusual color scheme, especially for the team based in Britain. I mean, we keep insisting that, we keep telling you that Bruce McLaren was from New Zealand, but I mean the team was a British-based team. So it's very nice colors for that, and really stands out from the rest. But I kind of like the fact that it's yeah, it has the ideas and innovation from these two worlds of Lotus and Cooper.
Yeah, very clear lines, and as you said, it looks beautiful, especially with this color scheme. And here we have the Cooper T81. Interesting to see a British team in red, which makes sense because it has an Italian
Yeah,
engine.
Maserati is there,
Correct.
but look at the back, and like in the best tradition of British engineering, you
Right.
have everything on the display, and I mean, considering the number of wires and bits and pieces there, you kind
Right.
of like when you look at it, you kind of worry about it, you know. So I'm just I think that if I were sort of the reliability engineer of this car, I would be really going to each race with some sort of hard drops just
Yeah.
in case, or some medication and kind of just in case something happens. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure it was, I mean, as we saw in the season, it was relatively reliable, but I mean, they did score some points and they were on podiums sometimes. But again, it just, yeah, didn't seem to be like a very well cooked car, at least at that point in 1966. And of course, they
Exactly.
also lost some engineering talent with we explained before that Brabham was there and he left a few years prior to Bruce McLaren, and Bruce McLaren effectively left the team the year before because he had his own company, but he was also racing for Cooper, and he had some good engineering ideas before. So I think it probably was also the fact that they were losing staff who were
Yeah.
very talented and wanted to do something on their own.
Yeah, and I mean, at the 1960s, the Formula One teams have still quite small. So if 1, 2 key employees left, it was very difficult to replace them.
Exactly. So you needed talented people, and you also needed to somehow keep them motivated, right? And as we explained before, if in one season you're winning, in the other season you're losing, it's difficult to keep people motivated, and that's why we see so many shifts in. Drivers go to different teams because they think they have better prospects. I mean, we saw one guy who navigated the system really well.
Yeah.
That was Fangio, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like he had I think some
Yeah.
sort of intuition for what is going to be, like who is going to have the best technology. But I mean, not all drivers have that, and not all drivers have seats for the next year, right? So, and I mean, and that's one problem. But equally, there is scarcity of talent. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, there have been one driver, and I will come to this when we speak about the drivers who may have particularly bad luck with decision. But first, continue with the
BRM.
car, BRM P83.
I think, I mean, this is very much in this Lotus arrow-shaped style, as you can see. And I mean, this is, I think, I would have expected Lotus to do something like this for 1966, simply because, it's kind of looks like a, a better developed Lotus in a sense. But, that really worked for BRM, as you could see. I mean, they've been quite competitive during the season, and generally, very nice car. Of course, Brabham just was better because they had they had better strategy on the straights, but nevertheless, good car from BRM.
Yep, agreed. And with this, we're coming to the two Ferraris. As we already mentioned, they used the 246, the six-cylinder car, and also the new F66 with the 12-cylinder, which the three 12 also a little bit newer construction, which they continued for the next seasons. So maybe due to the changes, they not have been clear which way to go. So they used practically both for the year.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and Patrick already explained that Ferrari, despite being very innovative, sometimes could have been quite rigid.
Yeah. Right.
And yeah, I mean, and like you said, there were some, I guess, financial issues because they needed the sponsorships, and they kind of, that's why there were all these negotiations with Ford and with Fiat, and you know, that obviously probably contributed to the fact that they had such different makes present in the same season.
Exactly. Then we come to the cars which have been a little bit more behind in the races. The Eagle MK1, the US car, which, if I'm not completely wrong, has been used by Dan Gurney, for example. But let's say this car didn't play a bigger role in the races.
Yeah, I like how it almost looks like a shark or an eagle, you know, with this kind of nose out. You know, so it's still very much arrow-shaped, sort of this vacuum cleaner, but like it almost had a peak, right, in the front. So it's kind of
Exactly
cool.
Like the Ferrari from '62, the shark nose.
Yeah, exactly. Shark nose. That's it.
Matra, they participated only at the Nürburgring, and this is a Formula 2 car. You see, it's less powerful, of course. Interesting, this was driven by Joe Schlesser, who had also, I think, a very well-known cousin, which was John Louis Schlesser. I think it was the cousin, at least it was the same family. So this car had been used by Matra itself and also had been deployed by Tyrrell. And as you see in the classic French blue.
Exactly.
Another team which had, let's say, a very disappointing year was Honda with Richie Ginter. Practically, they never played a bigger role in any of the 66 races.
I mean, this is kind of, I think, quite typical of Japanese teams because, you know, on the one hand, they produced a beautiful engineering, but then the problem always was, I think, part of the problem was the speed of decision making because, you know, to get all the approvals for a decision from Japan, it's many steps that you need to go. So I think it's just generally Japanese companies had very good collaborations with other brands in Formula One, but you know, we haven't actually seen big successes from the teams.
And another factor maybe that this team has been based in Japan, if I'm correct, so very far away from the big Formula One centers as the UK, or let's say even the north of Italy. So you not had interchange with other teams, people coming to you, people going to other teams. So of course, a little bit more difficult for them to get engineering talents into the team which had relevant experience with Formula One.
Yeah, that's right. And so like I said, I mean, it's kind of ironic because we know how good Japanese cars are. Yeah. And it's just really unfortunate that we haven't yet seen big champions from Japan in Formula One.
At least if we think of somebody who's doing manufacturing plus engine, as we know, the engine became much pretty successful later.
Yes, so that's what I mean. I mean, of course, they are as a collaborative party. They've been successful, but not as a standalone team.
Exactly. Then let's speak about the drivers. And
yeah, these are the. I mean, I think we've we've talked about Brabham before and John Surtees. Well, not in great detail, but he was already the world champion in 1964 when we talked about him. And the new guy is Jochen Rindt, who is Austrian. I mean, this was probably the first time we had an Austrian on in the first three, right? At least,
that's
yeah.
correct.
Yeah. So very cool driver. Unfortunately, died tragically in 1971 or 1970. I forget now, but driving for Lotus, I think 1970.
Exactly, and interesting here if we see the ages. Jack Brabham already had been 40 in 62, sorry, in 66, and one point, if I'm correct, in 65 and 64, he was beaten by Dan Gurney, so he always, who always had been a little bit faster than Brabham, and so a little bit surprising that he won 66. And so maybe a bad decision from Dan Gurney to leave at the end of 65 Brabham.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I think Jack Brabham had a very cool set of experiences, right, in the sport, because he was the engineer, and he was the driver, and he was the team principal at the same time. So maybe that actually, in this particular case, when we look at it, I think that probably helped. Because it was one thing when you listen to someone else giving you feedback about the car, right? And it's quite the other when you are inside, sort of, trying to understand what is going on and what you need for the next race.
No, they disagreed, but let's say if Dan Gurney would have stayed at Brabham, maybe he would have had the chance to win 66 championship.
Yeah. I mean,
not even be inside the top 9 positions.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that Brabham in this case took the lead car in a sense, right? Before he was a support driver, and that was in a sense he was in the kind of second car. But here he basically made a decision that he will sit in that seat, right? So that's what I mean when you are in this sort of, and we've discussed before in previous seasons how Brabham had really drastic differences between the two cars, right? The one was like in the top 3 and the other was like 7 or even not even ranked. So in a sense, the fact that he made that decision to be in the lead car is a significant one, and that I think also contributed potentially to the success.
Exactly, and when we speak about the lead car, it's not limited on the car itself, but also that he is working with the leading engineers.
Yeah, of course. So again, for some reason where it says John Surtees on the screen should say Graham Hill. But so this is Danny Hume. If you're seeing us on YouTube, it's Danny Hume. In the middle is actually Graham Hill and Jim Clark. So, and we've already talked about Graham Hill in great detail. There is a separate episode. So do check it out. So I think we haven't discussed, we talked a lot about Jim Clark as a champion, Formula One champion. And we haven't talked much about Danny Hume, who was from New Zealand and was basically a fellow driver of Jack Brabham, and have done quite well in the season. So he came 4th overall, and Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Patrick changed the name to correct one. Magic. I mean, the team is correct though. It's BRM. So Graham Hill driving for BRM. And if you watched an episode that we've done on him, he later switched to Lotus. And so he was, and then he had his own team. So do watch the episode that we've done on Graham Hill if you haven't done that yet.
Yeah,
So.
it was a lot of fun to speak about Graham Hill.
Yeah, there are some, if you haven't seen that episode, watch it on YouTube, because not only we show you Graham Hill in kind of racing conditions, but off racing conditions. There are some cool pictures of him in the hospital and with some belly dancers and whatnot. I mean, such a cool character.
I think it was been ballet dancer, not belly dancer.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. The Royal Ballet. Yeah, that's it.
And the positions 7 to 9. Jackie Stewart, we still not found a photo in.
Yeah, I will find it. I mean, to be honest, I didn't look properly yet, but I'm just, I guess, looking forward to the episode we're going to do on Jackie Stewart, which I'm sure we will. Maybe very soon. And yeah, there are many. I've got quite a few pictures of him, but I just, to be honest, it didn't register with me. That was like a senior photo of him that we've got we've got on the screen if you're watching us on YouTube. Yeah, and then we have Mike Parks for Ferrari, and Lorenzo Bandini, also really cool driving talent, died very young, unfortunately. And yeah, kind of very, very tragic death in 1967 in Monaco. Yeah, so very shocking thing, and kind of goes back to this lack of luck with Italian drivers in Ferrari. You know, something like just not not well there. But you know, at the time he was 31, very young, still very young driver, and you know, considering all the issues that Ferrari had, I mean, he had a win for Ferrari in the second part of the season, so in Monza.
And
so
he was leading the races in US and France before he got the technical problems. So based on his talent and speed alone, he should have been higher up.
Yeah, we will have a separate episode on Lorenzo Bandini, and I think just to give you a little bit of a preview, that Patrick will, I guess, try to argue. I'm just guessing here. He will probably try to argue that Lorenzo Bandini could have won some championships. So,
exactly.
anyways.
The important here, the word could, because if we discuss, let's say, parallel universe, as you know from the Avengers, Spider-Man, whatever, of course it is just one possible outcome. If some things, if some limited variables would have been changed, ignoring the fact that other things could have changed too. So it's, of course, it's an interesting playing around with numbers, but of course it's nothing automatically which could have happened. Saying this, the Constructors' Championship.
And points. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you will also see the photo of Jack Brabham from French Grand Prix from that season, from 1966. Yeah, so Brabham won with 11-point difference from Ferrari, and then everyone kind of trailed after that: Ferrari, Cooper, Maserati, and BRM. And yeah, indeed, not a great performance for Lotus, considering previous successes, but very nice to see, you know, McLaren to score in principle. I mean, this is quite cool. And in fact, Honda with 3 points as well. So that's nice. Because we do not see that very often when we talk about constructor championships. But yeah, very, very convincing win for Brabham in 1966.
Yes, and I think it was the strongest combination. One detail when we're looking at these names is if we are speaking about the Constructors' Championship, it was imperative that the car was together with the same type of engine. In 1966, is quite a new McLaren team. They received their engines, one from Ford, but also from a very small Italian workshop, the Scuderia Serenissima. They had been not really before a manufacture of engines. They had been quite active in the endurance races, driving Ferrari. But for 66, they developed an engine and they offer it to McLaren. And due to this, McLaren Ford has 2 points and McLaren Serenissima 1 point. Instead, McLaren having jointly 3 points. And 66 was the only year where they drove this Italian engine. Next year, they have only using the Ford motors.
Yeah, indeed. And if you watch us on YouTube, you will see the table here with Lotus. I mean, Lotus was basically the same deal when you had Lotus BRM counted separately from Lotus Climax, precisely for that reason as well. So you needed to kind of count the same makes equally.
Yes. And the behavior.
Yeah, I think we have we are already talking for over an hour about this season, so we can just wrap it up quickly. I think in terms of notable characters of the season, that would be Enzo Ferrari and John Surtees for me, and of course Jack Brabham. So that's kind of my top three, top three figures of the season. Notable wins, I would put probably the initial, still potentially the initial BRM win, and probably Ferrari's win in Monza, because I think that was quite difficult circumstances in which they won that race. And notable accidents, we would have to, of course, pick John Taylor's death. I think that is the most significant accident, the most significant tragedy of the season. And yeah, there were a number of notable strategies on good and bad side that we have already outlined. A good strategy for Brabham in terms of taking the first seat, in terms of making the car the way they made it, so kind of more like American style car. And effectively, combining, having very good combination of engineering and skill for Brabham. I think that's what made it. And then, of course, we would have to probably pinpoint at all the difficulties at Ferrari that lost them a very talented driver who in the end came second, probably could have come first. We can only speculate, but I guess that's the case. Generally, for various reasons, it didn't work out for them for that season, practically, because of all this sort of financial and strategic difficulties of attracting additional sponsorship and finally deciding on Fiat.
Yep, I agree to that. The legacy, I mean,
Brabham has to be.
Exactly, with the victory for Jack Brabham on Brabham, I mean, with this, he finally installed Brabham really as a name in a lasting name in Formula One, which a team which it stayed for decades, sometimes more, sometimes less successful, but it's a name that we still today know.
Yes, yes, indeed. I think that this is definitely the year of Brabham team
Yeah,
as a team, not just Jack Brabham as a driver, because I mean he was a world champion before, so we kind of know that he was good, but we didn't know that he was good as a team principal and also as a chief engineer. And this is really the year when it shined through. This talent shines through, and the team Brabham became very, very competitive. So yeah, this is definitely the year of Brabham. And I mean, so this is when we talk about Formula One, but obviously 1966 was also a remarkable year for Ford.
yeah,
In terms of all this controversy with Le Mans that we have already discussed.
yeah, and not to forget, they are now also an engine distributor for the McLaren team.
Yes, of course. And yeah, I mean, this was also the debut year for McLaren. So again, we should thank Cooper for probably not being a very good employer. So now we have McLaren team as we know it. But effectively, this happened, and it's great that it happened. It's great that it happened after 7 years, because most people stay where they are for years, and they don't move simply because they are quite risk averse. But I mean, it's great that Bruce McLaren found the strength to break away from Cooper and fully engage with Formula One. Effectively setting up one of the greatest teams in the history of Formula One sport.
Yeah, exactly. So again, this is all for today.
Yeah, and we just want to remind you again to please give us your views on what on the season. Maybe we missed something important. Maybe you disagree with us or agree with us. Do let us know. And as usual, we are on all social media with audio, and you can see the video on YouTube. So thanks a lot, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and until the next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.